ISO is Valorant's latest agent, and a lot of people seem to think that he's overpowered. His wall completely blocks bullets, his shield makes Raze's rocket useless, and then his ultimate is something we never thought we'd even see in the game. So when you first look at all of those abilities, it's pretty easy to see why he seems so broken. But if we take a look at all the gameplay we currently have and really break it down, you'll start to notice some of the holes in his kit. I don't necessarily think that ISO is going to be a bad agent, but let's take a look at each of his abilities, some of their stats, and why they probably aren't as good as you first thought. First, let's talk about his signature ability called Double Tap. You have to activate it like a jet dash, and then any kills or assists you get in this time frame will spawn an orb. Shooting that orb will provide you with a shield that blocks the next instance of damage that you take. It could be just one tick of a molly, it could be one classic bullet, or it could be a whole Raze ult or even a whole operator shot. Double tap lasts for a total of 15 seconds. However, this timer gets reset every time you activate the actual shield. This means that you can get multiple shields out of just one double tap use. Like you can see with Durka in this clip here, he uses double tap once and it's able to get 3 separate shields and make the ability last for over 25 seconds.
Show me a target.
Nice.
T-spawn.
One enemy remaining.
Wait, miss.
Bro, this is insane. You can just stack it up.
You'll get one use of double tap for free since again it's his signature ability, but it's also worth noting that you can buy a second charge for just 150 credits. You also get double tap every single time that you use your ultimate without having to actually activate that ability. So really in some rounds you can have 3 separate uses of double tap. One for free from the ultimate, and then your 2 other charges if you want to use them. You do have to get the timing right of using this ability though. Yeah, you can keep your gun out the whole time that it's charging up, which takes around a second, but any kills you get before it's fully activated won't count, and then you won't be able to get the orb for your shield. Speaking of the orb, it's only there for 2 seconds, so unlike Reyna where you can sort of leave the solve for a bit and decide what you want to do, here with ISO you need to get your shield almost immediately, and you're also throwing off your crosshair placement while doing so. Obviously it is possible to quickly flick up, grab the shield and flick back down, but I thought it was worth mentioning, especially again in comparison to Reyna, where you could be looking in the complete opposite direction and still activate either a dismiss or a heal. The part about the crosshair placement is partially why I think ISO won't be as good in pro or even just semi-organized levels of play, because the enemy is constantly ready to trade each other, and the second enemy is just going to swing out right as you're going to shoot your orb. One more downside to double tap that I haven't really seen anyone talking about yet is that enemies can actually break the orbs, which then prevents ISO from getting the shield. I couldn't find any gameplay examples of this happening, but here's one of the Riot devs talking about it.
So wait, I can shoot enemy's ISO orb so he doesn't get it?
Yes, if Sadak gets an orb, you can shoot it before he does, yeah.
So with all that in mind, I do still think double tap is useful. The shield will obviously be great against operators, and even just against normal rifles and some of the gameplay I've already seen, it saved people multiple times. The problem is going to be when you're getting swarmed by enemies, the orbs will almost become more detrimental than anything if you try and go for them. ISO's second ability, or his C ability, is called Contingency. You can equip and fire an indestructible moving wall that blocks bullets. Contingency only has 1 charge and costs 250 credits to buy. It covers a total distance of 30 meters and it takes 5 seconds to do so. You can't stop or control it at any point, so it'll just drop as soon as it reaches the end of that 30 meters. It doesn't collide with anything on the map, so that means it can go through walls. It's obviously similar to Harbor's Cascade, and so the best use case for this is probably going to be just sending it out in front of you as you entry onto site. To get the most cover from it, you'll obviously want to stay close, as that way the slanted edges can help make you just a little bit safer. I do think the wall can almost be a little bit deceiving because you'll start to notice that if you don't stay close to it, gaps on either side will start opening up really quickly, so yeah, make sure you're being careful of that. Since you can't shoot through Contingency, that does add something to it that Harbor's wall can't provide, and so you could use it to protect whoever is planting the spike on attack, since that only takes 4 seconds, while again the wall lasts for a total of 5 seconds. Of course, that also means on the flip side, you can use it on defense to protect whoever is defusing, but in that case it won't quite keep you protected the whole time, and the enemy will still be able to hit you with any lineups they have, so keep that in mind. There are a few more niche scenarios that I thought this ability would be useful for as well. For example, helping secure ultimate orbs if your team is one off something like a Killjoy or Brimstone ult, or you could even use it when reviving a KO, or to provide cover for a Sage res. For 250 credits, it's a pretty solid ability, but it feels a little too small to me, and I think it gets outclassed by the entering tools of other duelists. Next up we have ISO's Q ability, which is called Undercut. You equip and fire out a fast moving projectile which goes through walls. Upon hitting an enemy, it will make them vulnerable for 4 seconds, which means they take double damage to all sources. This ability has 2 charges which you have to buy for 200 credits each. and the range is 35 meters, which conveniently is the same as an Omen Flash. The two key differences between those abilities when it comes to the area of effect is that Undercut moves much faster, but it's also skinnier when compared to Paranoia. One thing that I will admit does make me really interested in this ability is what it means for some of the different weapons. We all know that the main advantage of the Vandal over the Phantom is that you can one-tap at any range, but if that enemy is vulnerable, all of a sudden you can also one-tap them with a Phantom from any range. The same thing goes for the Bulldog. Sure, you won't be buying one as often as your main rifles, but still, instead of hitting an enemy for 115 with a headshot, you'll be doing 230 damage with that headshot, again at any range. It gets better than that though when you start looking at some of the even cheaper weapons. The Marshal starts looking a lot more viable since you'll only need to hit one body shot, and my personal favorite is the Ghost, which will now headshot for 174 damage at any range. Even a Classic will be able to one-tap from anything less than 30 meters, since one bullet will do 156 damage to a vulnerable enemy. Undercut will also be great in combination with damage dealing abilities like a Raise Grenade, Mollies, or especially Sova's utility, since both Shock Darts and Hunter's Fury can one-shot a vulnerable opponent. The vulnerable effect obviously isn't new, we've already seen it in abilities like Viper's Snakebite and Killjoy's Alarm Bot, but we've never had so much control over where exactly the debuff hits. The one major problem with all this though is that unlike other debuffs, enemies aren't really as disadvantaged when compared to say a Flash or a Stun. They can still see perfectly fine and have perfect accuracy, so if the opponent can react faster than you, chances are you'll die before you can even capitalize on all that vulnerability. The whole effect of this ability only lasts for 4 seconds as well, so while this is still great for weapons such as the Ghost and Marshal like I was saying before, it's a pretty small time window and after that passes, you're just going to be stuck with a worse weapon. Another thing worth noting is that you can make your teammates vulnerable too with this ability if you aren't careful. So while in theory this ability could be great to set up a teammate to go in, you need to make sure you aren't hitting them as well as the enemy, as I doubt they'll appreciate getting one-tapped by Classics. I think Undercut is going to be really fun and powerful on eco rounds to create opportunities of taking down stronger enemies, but other than that, the vulnerable effect doesn't really hinder people enough when it comes to actual gunfights, and like I said earlier, other duelists with flashes would be able to take the same fights a lot easier. Finally, we come to ISO's ultimate, Kill Contract. With some of his other abilities, I think I've been pretty harsh when it comes to judging them and how good they are, but with this ultimate, I actually really like it. Sure, there's still a few downsides to discuss, but I'll go over those later. When you fire a Kill Contract, it covers a pretty massive range, around 50 meters. When you look at it on the minimap here, it goes a little bit further than a Fade ult would, but it's also a little bit skinnier. The closest enemy that you hit will then be dragged with you into an arena, where you duel to the death. Now it costs 7 ultimate points to use, however every time you use it, you are guaranteed to get an ultimate point back, because you'll either eliminate your opponent or die to them, so after the first use, I like to think of it as a 6 orb ultimate instead. It's also very hard to dodge this ability since it covers such a massive area and it only takes about a second to drag you in. There will be a few abilities that allow enemies to escape, like Jet's Dash, Chamber's TP, or even Reyna's Dismiss, but for the most part, if you know where an enemy is, you should pretty easily be able to grab them. Technically, Kill Contract lasts for up to 15 seconds, and then if no one has won the duel at that point, both players will die. Realistically though, the whole thing is going to be over in like not even 10 seconds most of the time, and I'm talking from the moment this ability is cast to the moment the winner is released from the arena. I was really interested in the timings for this ability, so here's what I learned. Like I said earlier, it takes a second from when the ability is cast to grab someone, and then when you're in the arena, the walls are actually only there for less than 3 seconds, and that's including the time it takes for them to go up and come back down. Then at the end, there's 2 seconds where you can break the orb to get a shield, and after that, within just 1 more second, you're back in the real world with your gun and can move around. It's worth mentioning that with this ultimate, both the participants disappear from the main map, and on the ground you'll see a little indicator where they're going to spawn back in, like those Easter eggs on Sunset. This can lead to some funny scenarios depending on who the ISO grabs, like here where the Gecko just disappears from in front of Ethos.
Actually, I might have think oh wait, what?
What the
Just happened? Oh, you stole him!
When you both spawn in the arena, you and your opponent will go back to full HP and have your weapons reloaded. I've seen some people suggest that the enemies shouldn't get any health restored to make a bigger advantage for ISO, but I honestly think the 2 shields versus 1 is a big enough advantage, since as ISO you can just watch that one barrier in a smaller area, whereas the enemy has more options to choose from and they'll be less sure of where you're going to peek. Within the ultimate, neither of you can use abilities. This makes Kill Contract especially impactful against the ultimates of Jet, Raze, and Chamber. I can already see that people will start using Kill Contract like how you currently use Brimstone ult to counter a Killjoy ult. As soon as you see the enemy Jet pop knives, you find where they are and ult them. This takes them into an arena where their knives are useless, and hopefully they'll be left with just a classic, or if you're really lucky, a shorty. It's not just those weapon-like ultimates either, because if you take away an enemy like a Cypher, Killjoy, or even Viper, their utility back on the map will all deactivate. So so assuming that you can actually hit them, it's as effective as pushing onto a site with a KO ult. I would even go as far to say that it can be more effective, since the rest of your team doesn't even have to worry about that enemy shooting back, as they'll be too busy with you. I think even though there will be higher priority targets like I mentioned in those two examples, this ultimate will just generally be good for rushing a site with your team, as you can use it to disrupt enemy crossfires. Even if you lose the fight in your ultimate, by the time the enemy goes back to the map, your team has hopefully swarmed the site, and they can pretty much spawn camp the enemy when they return. His ultimate will also be strong against obviously shotguns, and depending on the skill of the opponent, operators as well. Either way, a really good use of it is going to be to clear an angle where the enemy is AWPing for your team, and then you just have to hope they miss their one shot, and then you can win the fight. Similar to Undercut though, a lot of the value in ISO's ultimate depends on actually knowing where the enemy is, and being able to line up the ability and hit them. In the case of Kill Contract, the massive range and fast activation time makes it easy enough to hit someone more often than not, but on the occasion that you don't hit anyone, then the ultimate is completely wasted. You're also unaware of what's going on the map while you're inside your ultimate. Like here, Cryo uses his ultimate and wins the duel, which is great, but in doing so he takes himself out of the fight entirely, and the enemy team is able to defuse.
I'm gonna hold the bomb when he taps.
Yeah, dude.
No distraction.
They're on one tap it again.
Nice.
One tap it.
No,
Last player standing.
Oh,
He's on.
Contract complete.
he's on.
Oh.
At the end of the day, this ultimate is just a 1v1, and even though ISO gets a slight advantage with the 2 shields rather than 1, it's far from a guaranteed kill like a lot of other ultimates are in this game. I definitely think that it has its uses, but for now it can only be rated so highly. I think ISO is going to be a lot of fun to run it down with in ranked, and I'll definitely be trying to interlock him when he releases next act. Having said that, it feels like other agents better feel the duelist role than him, and so he's going to struggle to find playtime in the pro scene. I don't think he's awful, I just think for the moment people are overrating him. Having said that, I'd love to hear what you guys think about ISO, and I guess we'll see how it all turns out when he's playable in ranked.